you about here to talk to you about nutrition. And let's see if I can get the next slide to go. And I wanted to talk to you about nutrition and how you can apply it towards better serving your clients and also, for your own personal information. So the first thing I'd like to ask from you is to think about what nutrition means to you. What do you think when you hear the word nutrition? For some people, they think it's healthy foods. Other people think it means eating well. Other people tend to think about more specific items like salads or others like stereotypically healthy foods. However, nutrition isn't good or bad. It is actually just the process of consuming, absorbing, and using nutrients from your food that are necessary for proper growth, development, and body or maintenance of life. At this point, I do want to mention that when I do talk about diets throughout this presentation, I'm not talking specifically about weight loss diets. I'm just talking about the sum of the foods a person generally eats in a day. And that would be the diet. So next, I wanted to talk about nutrient-rich versus nutrient-poor diets. So some characteristics of nutrient-rich diets are contain foods that are high in vitamins, minerals, and then balanced macronutrients, which would be your complex carbohydrates, your complete proteins, and your healthy fats. When we talk about nutrient-poor diets, they tend to have little or no vitamins, little to no minerals, and macronutrients tend to be imbalanced. There tend to be a lot of added sugars or very simple carbohydrates that break down really easily, also saturated fats. And then on the topic of macronutrients, I wanted to talk about macro versus micro. So your macronutrients are the nutrients that you get the majority of your energy from. Those are your carbohydrates, your lipids, and your proteins, and you need a significant amount of each of those per day. Your micronutrients are your vitamins and minerals. You need much smaller amounts, but they are absolutely necessary for maintaining good health. In regards to carbohydrates, those are your whole grains, your fruits, your vegetables. They provide the body with sugar, specifically glucose, that the body uses to make energy that could be used for cellular functions. And there are generally two types of carbohydrates, complex versus simple. Complex carbohydrates are generally unprocessed or minimally processed, meaning that they still have for like wheat and rice, they tend to have still the germ and the hull, so that's your brown rice, your whole wheat flours. Those are the parts of the whole grain that part of the grain that contains the minerals, the vitamins, the fiber. Those allow the carbohydrate to take longer to digest, which results in a slow release of glucose into your bloodstream. It'll help you feel full longer. The simple carbohydrates, also sometimes called simple sugars, tend to be highly processed. They lack those minerals, vitamins, and fiber. And because of that, they are digested easily, which results in blood sugar spikes. And you tend to feel hungry quicker because the sugar spikes and then it falls very rapidly. In regards to proteins, they are used for making bone cells, muscle cells, cartilage, skin, blood, enzymes that are necessary for all metabolic processes in your body, and as well as hormones, which are chemical messengers that tell your body when it's time to do things that it needs to do. And then protein also can be broken down to create energy. It just takes longer than carbohydrates. And because of that, when you are eating something and you pair a protein with a carbohydrate, you tend to feel full even longer, because once you've processed the energy from the carbohydrates, then you're starting to access that energy from the proteins. Proteins are composed of little countless substances called amino acids. And the human body requires 20 amino acids to build proteins, 9 of which are those amino acids are considered essential. And that is because we cannot manufacture them at all. We have to ingest them through our diet. And you may have heard mentioned previously complete versus incomplete proteins. And what that means is a complete protein contains all 9 of those essential amino acids that we cannot create ourselves. An incomplete protein only would contain a portion of those 9 essential amino acids. That doesn't mean that it's a bad protein. It just means that you need to pair it with another food item that has those missing pieces, and that's just fine. And then talking about protein sources, most people think meat, poultry, fish, seafood, which are excellent sources of protein. You just want to remember lean and low fat sources are going to be better than the higher fat options, just for cardiovascular fitness. They are also more, the iron and protein in these sources is a lot easier to absorb than other sources such as eggs. And I forgot to put dairy products on here as well. I apologize. And then also beans, peas, lentils, nuts, seeds, and soy products. So the beans, peas, lentils, nuts, seeds, soy products are incomplete proteins. Generally, you have to pair it with another food item in order to get a complete protein. You may have heard before that like beans and rice mixed like together creates a complete protein. And then dietary fats are incredibly important. They're used for supporting cellular function, also for energy. We need fats to help absorb vitamins A, D, and E. Fats also help us feel full, and they are responsible for carrying flavor. There are 4 types of dietary fats. Saturated fats and trans fats tend to be solid at room temperature, and they're not as great for you as the others. Monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats tend to be liquid at room temperature, and those are like your olive oils and your other vegetable oils. And then I wanted to just throw in here real quick a little mention about recommended dietary allowances, also known as RDAs. You will have seen these most likely on nutrition labels that are on all food packaging. They're generally based off a 2,000 calorie per day diet, which is fairly average. But it is important to know that nutritional needs vary based on your sex, age, height and weight, activity level, and other physiological conditions such as pregnancy or lactation. For me, I think I did a calculation to maintain my current body weight. It was like 1,900 calories, but ideally it would be 1,600. So it really does vary from person to person. That breaks down to, for a 2,000 calorie a day diet, 130 grams of carbohydrates per day, and an acceptable or an agreed upon acceptable range of carbohydrates would make up 45 to 65% of your diet. For protein, it's 7 grams of protein per 20 pounds of body weight. So if a person weighs 100 pounds, ideally they would need 70 grams of protein per day. And that accounts to roughly 10 to 35% of your daily diet. And for fat, that does vary quite a bit. It's 44 to 78 grams per day, but it is recommended no more than 22 grams per day of saturated fats, as that would increase risk for heart disease. And about 20 to 35% of your daily diet should be consistent of fats. And then there are the micronutrients. They are measured in much smaller amounts, but they are just as important. They are necessary for healthy development, prevention of disease, and just overall well-being. Micronutrients must come from a person's diet, with the exception of vitamin D, which we can actually synthesize from the sun. However, if someone is unable to do that, if they're not getting enough sunlight, or if they have some other complication that they're not able to do that, they would have to get it through their diet. And I also did want to note, some minerals and vitamins can block or enhance the absorption of other minerals and vitamins, and that's something to consider when either taking any supplements or while eating. So I did want to talk about iron. It's a very important micronutrient used for hormone development. It's important for cognitive and motor development, as well as the creation of hemoglobin, which is necessary for oxygen transport. The recommended dietary allowance is generally about 8 milligrams a day for all adults, except for women ages 19 to 50, where they recommend 18 milligrams daily. You can find iron in food sources such as meat, poultry, fish, shellfish, eggs, leafy greens. That'd be like your kale, your spinach, like turnip greens, all those really dark leafy greens, and then broccoli. And you can also find it in beans, nuts, and legumes. Vitamin C is important for controlling infection, wound healing, collagen production, and hormone production. And it actually will help increase your ability to absorb iron from what they call non-heme sources. So those will be your vegetables or eggs. Like heme irons, which come from meats, are easier to absorb without the vitamin C, but vitamin C is very good for absorbing iron. It's recommended that a person consumes 75 to 90 milligrams of vitamin C a day. However, they have found that smokers have a decreased amount of vitamin C, and they're recommended to consume 35 milligrams more per day than an average person. And you can find vitamin C in lots of fruits and vegetables. Oranges are very high in vitamin C, but so are like the bell peppers, red, yellow, orange bell peppers. And then also in some of your vegetables. And then I would like to talk about vitamin D is incredibly important because it helps us absorb calcium, which is important for muscle movement, nerve function, and we store it in our bones, which gives our bones structure and strength, but also is important for cardiac function, which of course muscle movement. So back to the vitamin D. I apologize for skipping around. The recommended dietary allowance for an adult for vitamin D is 15 micrograms per day for adults 19 to 70 years old. For adults older than 70, they recommend 20 micrograms a day. The reason for this is as we get older, we tend to start having bone loss. So we want to increase our ability to store calcium in our bones so that we don't develop like things like osteoporosis, brittle bones, which could easily lead to fractures. You can find vitamin D in fortified foods, very commonly seen in our milk products. It's also in fatty fish, such as salmon, and it can even be found in small amounts in beef liver, egg yolks, and cheese. Calcium, like I said, it was important for all those functions listed, and it's recommended that an individual consumes 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams a day. And that you can find in dairy or fortified alternatives like almond milk or soy milk. Leafy greens, that's again your spinach, like bok choy. Also found in tofu, in sardines and salmon. Also in tahini, which is sesame seeds ground up, and fortified juices. And I see that a lot with orange juice, the fortified. All right, so next I wanted to talk about iodine, which is not one you really think about. A lot of people can think of iodine as something you put on a wound, but iodine is actually incredibly important for thyroid health. It's most important during pregnancy and infancy, but it is still important throughout your whole life. The recommended dietary allowance is 150 micrograms per day, and it can be found in fish, seaweed, shrimp, dairy, and eggs. And the most common place we find it is iodized salt. Most table salts that you can get in the United States have iodine added to it because there was such a lack of it in the diet that they were concerned. So they've added it to the salt, but it isn't seen as much in processed foods. So we know the processed foods tend to have a lot of sodium in it, which we see as salt, but it tends not to be the iodized variety. As far as folate, it is very important for new cellular growth, and we are growing new cells all day, every day. So it's important to keep that in your diet. The recommended amount is 400 micrograms a day, and you can get that in beef liver, in vegetables, fruits, nuts and beans, peas, and enriched grains and fortified cereals. And it's actually very common to find in all those grains and cereals. And then the last one I have on the slide is zinc, which is important for immune function, 8 to 11 milligrams a day. It has a very high amount in oysters, but I know that's not really a common everyday item, but it can also be found in meat, fish, poultry, seafood, and fortified cereals. And I apologize, I didn't do a slide for these, but some other important minerals are magnesium, potassium, and then sodium, which are all important for cellular function. A lot of people tend to think sodium is bad, and it's not. It's absolutely necessary. It's just not great when you have too much of it. And then I wanted to make a quick note about supplementation. There are times when a client is not able to get adequate nutrition from food alone, either due to dietary restrictions or preferences. If foods are not available, say it's out of season or it's just not available in your area. Sometimes cost is a barrier. Fruits and vegetables can be very expensive, and so it's really a lot, sometimes more financially practical to get processed foods that don't have as much nutrition. And then, of course, there's always other stuff that could be a concern. In those cases, vitamin and mineral supplements are available, but would definitely need to talk to a primary care provider about it prior to administrating, because sometimes vitamins and minerals can interfere with medications or with certain medical conditions. So like with any other medication, you'd want to clear out with a doctor first. And then I wanted to go over dietary guidelines have changed quite a lot over the past century. And it's weird to think that we've had dietary guidelines that long. But the first dietary guidelines were released in the early 1900s as a way to try to communicate with the public the best way to get the nutrition for better health. And it's evolved over the years. Prior to the MyPlate model, which is what we're currently using, was the food pyramid, and that was what I grew up with, was the food pyramid. And so it was kind of strange going from the pyramid to the plate, but after reading about it, it makes perfect sense. Unfortunately, the pyramid placed a lot of emphasis on carbohydrates and kind of vilified fats a little bit, which is not great because fats are absolutely necessary to the diet. And it was even recommending up to 13 servings of carbohydrates a day of whole grains, which is a lot. So there was the big move to the MyPlate, which recommends fruits and vegetables compromising half of your plate, and then a quarter of your plate for healthy proteins and a quarter plate for whole grains, and then using healthy oils like olive or canola oil. And then definitely drinking water with your meals, and 1 to 2 servings a day of dairy, and to choose low-fat options when able, especially with meat. That doesn't mean don't enjoy red meats, but to eat them in moderation to help reduce risk for cardiovascular disease. And then I just found these images were way easier to look at than just a diagram, just to kind of show what portioning would look like on a plate for your fruits, vegetables, your grains, which are, it's a half cup serving, which when you look at a half cup measuring cup, it looks kind of small, but it actually ends up being a significant amount. And then also the portion size for proteins. And then I found this PDF online, which I wanted to give you the link to, because I found it to be extremely helpful. So it's the Dietary Guidelines for Americans for 2020 to 2025. It was released by the USDA. Sorry, I'm gonna get a little water. Okay. So it was released by the USDA to break down nutritional dietary needs based upon different stages of life. And I apologize, this is probably really hard to read on a lot of screens, but I just kind of wanted to throw it in here because it shows the breakdown of what you can find within this PDF. Talks about nutrition and health across the lifespan. There's a section on infants and toddlers, sections on adults, sections on women who are pregnant or lactating, and then another section on older adults. And it includes sections about how to support healthy eating, special considerations. There's just a whole lot of information in here, and it would be a great way to have kind of like a reference for yourself and for your clients. And additionally, on this website, I'm going to go back just in case anyone didn't get a chance to write it down and they wanted to. There is actually a link from this website where you could actually get continuing education units for reading this guideline, and it gives you the instructions on how to do that at this website. And I am going to take just a half a second to ask if anybody has any questions right now, because I know I'm kind of going through this a little fast and I don't want to miss anything. Does anyone have any questions currently? All right, then. I did want to now go into reading labels, which can be confusing. It's really easy, of course, to look at the calories, but frequently people forget to look at the amount per serving, which is that section there in red is your serving size. And sometimes the units of measurement are not necessarily the most easy to measure. Like not everybody measures by milliliters, not everybody measures by grams. And when measuring things like flour or sugar, it's pretty easy to pack more into one of those measuring containers. Like you can pack quite a bit more weight wise into a measuring cup versus, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, I apologize. If you scoop flour, say, there can be a lot more in that cup than if you had sifted it in. And so sometimes the weight measurement is significantly different than what the serving size measurement is, which can be difficult, but that's that portion. And then if you look at the section in the blue, that's the percentage of daily value of that nutrient for a person based upon a 2,000 calorie per day diet. And then the purple section highlighted here, those are your macronutrients. So those are the ones that you need the most of during the day. Those are your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats. And then your micronutrients are highlighted there in orange, and that's your sodium, vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. And not every label has the same micronutrients on there. It will always have sodium, but sometimes you will see things like vitamin A on there or vitamin B. That does sometimes vary. And I just wanted to show some sample labels just because sometimes I feel like food companies have kind of gotten savvy to the fact that people are concerned about their health and want to start eating better. So they try to package foods in a way that's appealing without necessarily changing their formula because their formula tastes good. And this is from my own personal experience. I actually grabbed a box of the spinach souffle for my kids because I was like, oh, this is something they would probably like. And it's only 150 calories per serving. And I was thinking that the whole container was 150 calories because it's a small box, but it actually has 3 servings per container. So the whole little bitty container was 430 calories, which with my young kids, I'm not super concerned about, but it also had 57% of the daily allowance for sodium, which is a lot. So this is still in my freezer because I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with it. But just to be aware that that's something to take into consideration. That blurb on the front of the box, sometimes they'll put the per serving in a very small font, so you can't really read it or you don't notice it right away. And then I also wanted to show just kind of a comparison between food items where they have labeled some as heart healthy or low carb, or you'll see trans fat free. There's a lot of buzzwords on labeling now. And while you can, I don't know if you can see this on your screen, while the Healthy Request soup is lower in sodium than the original, this whole can here still contains 890 milligrams of sodium, which is 39%, nearly 40% of your daily allowance for sodium, which is quite significant. However, it is way better than the original formula, which is 81% of the daily amount for sodium. So those are the sorts of things that you want to be careful looking at on labels. And sometimes when you see them switch out something like the sodium on the Healthy Request, if you take a look at, where was it? There's actually more saturated fat in the Heart Healthy than the original formula, but there's also more potassium in the Heart Healthy, which is good. A lot of Americans don't get enough potassium in their diet. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good or it's a bad food. It's just something to be aware of when you're looking at what you're eating for a whole day. And as I've mentioned, nutritional needs vary based on your gender, your age, height, weight, activity level, and health status. So if you're convalescing or that sort of thing, that'll change your nutritional requirements. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about health or your nutritional needs based upon health conditions. So a lot of our clients tend to have what we call our comorbidities, other conditions in addition to why we care for them that will affect how they eat or how they should eat. So the first one I wanted to talk about was heart disease. So I'm talking about conditions like hypertension, which is high blood pressure, hyperlipidemia, congestive heart failure. These individuals are going to require diets that are lower in saturated fats, that are lower in sodium, and they would need diets that have more increased fiber. And I apologize, I kind of lost my space here. So one of the things that that was created for, I guess you could call treatment of cardiac issues was the DASH diet. So that is a diet that focuses on vegetables, fruits, and whole grains with the goal of limiting sodium, sugar, and saturated fats to better promote cardiac health. And I'm guessing it might be difficult to read from your screen, but I've put on here a daily meal plan for somebody who is on the DASH diet. And then it breaks it down at the bottom what the sum of is in the day. So the total sum for this day for this individual would be 2,069 milligrams of sodium a day. And then this is 8.25 servings of grains, 4 3/4 servings of vegetables, 5 servings of fruit, 4 servings of dairy, and that would be your low-fat dairy, 3 servings of meat and fish, 1.5 of nuts, seeds, and legumes, 2.5 servings of fats and oils, and no added sweets or added sugars. That's not to say that sweets and sugars should never be a part of the diet. I would be very sad if we never had the opportunity to eat those again. Just in moderation, not an everyday food item, not a food to eat in excess, that sort of thing.
Katie, this is Nellie. I'm wondering back to the other slide, if you can maybe, because it was a little bit difficult to read, just kind of really list really quick, like what was included under breakfast, under lunch, and dinner, just for those who weren't able to totally read it.
Totally. So for this person's breakfast, they had 1 cup of whole grain oat grains, so like Cheerios, 1 medium banana, and 1 cup of low-fat milk. And then they also had 1 cup of fruit yogurt that was fat-free with no sugar added. For lunch, they had a tuna salad sandwich. So that was 1/2 cup of tuna drained and rinsed, 1 tablespoon of low-fat mayonnaise, 1 large leaf of romaine lettuce, 2 slices of tomato, 2 slices of whole wheat bread, 1 medium apple, and 1 cup of low-fat milk. For dinner, they had a quarter recipe of zucchini lasagna, and that was, lasagna salad, excuse me. And that was made with 1 cup of spinach, 1 cup of tomato wedges, 2 tablespoons of croutons, 1 tablespoon of vinaigrette dressing, and then 1 tablespoon of sunflower seeds. And they also had a small whole wheat roll with 1 teaspoon of soft margarine and 1 cup of grape juice. And for a snack throughout the day, they had half a cup of almonds that were unsalted, a quarter cup of dry apricots, and then 6 whole wheat crackers. And I would assume that they drink quite a bit of water through their day as well. So that's just kind of how that all broke down for that individual. And for that total, for that whole day, that was 1,993 calories. And there we go. All right, any other questions right now? Okay, so talking about considerations for our individuals who have diabetes, the focus is more non-starchy vegetables. So that'll be things like your broccoli, your spinach, your green beans, trying to avoid the starchy vegetables like your potatoes. And then making sure there are fewer added sugars or refined grains. So more of the complex carbohydrates, the whole grains, which are harder to break down into sugars. So you get that slow release of glucose into your bloodstream versus that rapid release. That'll help maintain blood sugars throughout the day. And then many individuals are requested by their primary doctor to count carbohydrates. So there are 3 different types of carbohydrates, and I'm not sure if it was on the slide with the nutrition label. Typically under carbohydrates, there'll be a section that says like added sugars or total sugars. And sometimes there's a little blurb there that says how much fiber is in the accounts for those carbohydrates. And it's important to know that fiber does not raise your blood sugar. So if you ever see someone who's counting carbs and they subtract the fiber, the grams of fiber from the total sugar, that's the reason why they're doing that, is because it doesn't count as a counted carb. And then 1 carb serving is equivalent to 15 grams of carbohydrates. So if you're eating something and it's got 30 grams of carbohydrates, it counts as 2 servings of carbs. And the plate for an individual who is being considerate of carbs, this is what kind of like a my plate would look like. So half of your plate would be the non-starchy vegetables, a quarter would be your carb foods, and that would include some of your fruits. And then protein foods would be another quarter of your plate, and then water or 0 calorie drink, but low fat milk is also still okay in small amounts. And then I also wanted to talk a little about diets for individuals with obesity, as that is actually quite a big concern with some individuals. Overall, the goal for a diet for someone who is obese is weight loss. And that really just results in like a calorie reduction. And that would be something that would need to be determined by their physician, what is safe for a calorie restriction. Slower weight loss is better than rapid weight loss. It's more attainable, and it's easier than drastically cutting calories out of a diet. The emphasis for weight loss diets is on fruits and vegetables, whole grains, fat-free or low-fat milk and milk products, diet that is low in added sugars, sodium, saturated trans fats, and cholesterol. And then, like I said, limiting the total daily calories as recommended by a physician. And that's not to say that comfort foods are not to be eaten. They most definitely need to be. That's the only way to keep going, is just make sure you eat those comfort foods less often and in smaller amounts. And then try and lower calorie versions. For example, they have a lot of ice creams now that have like, they use like sugar alcohols instead of other added sugars. So it's not as high calorie. It's of course not as good, but it is an alternative that some people find palatable. And then, like I said, change will not happen overnight, and it shouldn't. That's not sustainable. And that's what we want. So what we need to do are make small changes here and there, and just work your way from there. You could start by trying to use like olive oil, or like avocado oil, any of those fruit or vegetable oils instead of more saturated fats like your lard or your butter. Switching to like snacking on fruits instead of candy, which is, I mean, it's not always, it doesn't always satisfy that craving, but sometimes it is helpful. Switching from sugary sodas to carbonated waters. Some people are fine with just switching to sugar-free versions of sodas, but I know that some people are not fond of sugar-free items, which is understandable. So carbonated waters are a nice way to get that flavor and the bubbles without all the sugar. And then you can also look at different brands. For example, my son loves chicken nuggets. It's like the only thing I can get him to eat. So it's been kind of a challenge to find something that I feel comfortable giving him on a routine basis. But by comparing different brands, you can find ones that are lower in saturated fats or lower in salts. And then just test that out until you can find something that works for you. And then also to be considerate of like protein, or not protein, portion sizes. Sometimes something looks like it's a better deal because it's only 130 calories per serving versus 200. But if you look at the serving size, the reason why it's lower calories is because the serving size is a lot smaller. So that's something to think about as well. You could also try putting dressings or dips on the side rather than putting them directly on your food. And that could be like ketchup on the side instead of on your fries, or salad dressing on top of your salad or on the side of your salad versus on your salad. Pre-measuring food can also be useful. So if you open a bag of chips, you can pre-measure the portion size of chips that you're comfortable eating after you look at the label. And then closing the bag up and putting the bag away. So that way you're not as tempted to continue eating out of the bag. And then also preparing foods at home versus using pre-prepared foods. And I am very guilty of using the pre-prepared foods because it is convenient and I don't have time to make a bunch of food at home. Meal planning will help with that. If you can plan stuff ahead of time and have it prepped and you can just throw it together. Also, what I've done on occasion, which works well for my family, is I will take a pre-made meal and I will add to it. So like last night I got that stir fry from Costco, and rather than just serving it as is, I added a bunch more vegetables to it, and I used only one of the sauce cups instead of both of the ones that come with the meal. So I was able to decrease the amount of sodium in the meal and increase the amount of fiber through the vegetables and with all those vitamins and minerals in there, but we still get the satisfaction of having stir fry. So that's a thought. And I think I am wrapping up a little bit early. So if anyone has any questions or comments, that would be fantastic. And feel free to use the chat box if you'd like. Well, Jen or Nellie, do you have anything to add or?
That was a lot of great information, Katie. Thank you.
Anytime. I'm sorry that I didn't have more.
No, that's okay. I think, maybe some of our guests can maybe in the chat put like some common health conditions they have with their clients that they could use some advice on, or maybe I know one of the things that is a struggle is for our individuals with autism can be really have a lot of food aversions and it can be really hard to sneak nutrition into meals. Do you have any ideas on how to do that?
I've been like, what I've been seeing recommended is offering preferred foods, but also offering alongside that something else for them to try, but in a very small amount, not touching the food, maybe even on a separate plate, and just have that become something that's just there. So they're used to seeing it, maybe letting them touch it or play with it, which totally goes against, you know, at least how I was raised, like, don't play with your food. I know if they're playing with their food, they're interacting with it, which is fantastic. Maybe someday they might actually put it in their mouth. You don't know. But if they're not or absolutely refusing to eat anything other than their preferred foods, you can definitely talk to a provider about supplementation. In my personal experience, we've had to introduce gummy vitamins because the gummies are preferable foods, like fruit gummies. So that's a way to get it in the diet, but it's not the preferred way, but it is a way, or using fortified drinks like protein shakes if that's something they're into. But that's what I've got on that. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Jen or Nellie.
I think hi, this is Nellie. I think that's a great suggestion. I'm wondering if any of the participants here in the group have any other like tips or tricks that have worked with their clients.
This is Rachel Harmon. I do have a question. So we have a client coming in who has type 1 diabetes, and I work knock shift. Is there any snacks that you suggest that we can just keep stocked in the house that won't, you know, be harmful for him, that won't spike his blood sugar?
In that event, I would suggest talking to whoever they're living with currently what their nighttime routine is. Just because if there's already a set routine for nighttime snacks, it would be good not to change that unless it's detrimental.
Yeah, he's coming from like a mental facility that keeps everything kind of locked down. They're on a very strict schedule, and he's going to have a lot more freedom coming here. Yeah.
It also kind of depends on what he likes to eat or they like to eat.
True.
That might be important to find out first, because it would be hard if you stacked up on a bunch of food that this person's not interested in eating. That would be a bummer.
Very true. Well, he doesn't seem picky, so I mean,
okay, gotcha.
Anything you suggest, really.
So protein is generally pretty good, like like string cheese, like a cheese stick or something. So that doesn't.
This is
sorry?
Vanessa from Curtis Homes. We have a diabetic in one of our facilities, and if he wants night snacks, we will usually offer the cheese sticks, or we do hard-boiled eggs.
Okay.
Also really good, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Can anyone think of anything else? Or I really appreciate all your feedback.
I think the biggest thing that I've seen clients struggle with is sticking to, for a diabetic, is sticking to sugar-free sodas and low-fat items. So diabetes is one of those tricky things where there's a lot of sugar in the blood, but there's not a lot of sugar in the cells. And so the cells are wanting sugar. And so there's a craving for sugar. So coming up with things that are sweet, but not actually, that don't actually raise blood sugar is helpful. So sweeteners like stevia or other sweeteners that don't raise blood sugar are handy to have around. If they like to add a little sweetness to like cereals and things like that. But just really paying attention to those nutrition labels and how much actual sugar is in the food products that you're purchasing, and remembering that like juice is not always a better option than soda. Juice is really high in sugar. Some vegetable juices aren't as bad, but it does surprise you sometimes when you look at a food label what's actually in it. Plus, a lot of companies will sneak sugars into things that don't normally have a lot of sugar in them because, of course, that makes it more appealing. And people, tend to crave those items. So there's some great shows on Netflix, I think, has one that's all about added sugar and kind of the addictive qualities of corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup that's added into foods. Like you'd be surprised, but like jarred spaghetti sauce, for instance, has a ton of added high fructose corn syrup in it. So, making sure that you're checking those labels and picking one that doesn't have a lot. If you're, maybe making a pasta or something for dinner, just being aware of those kinds of things is, I think, really important.
I was just going to add, thanks, Jen. On the topic of sugar, is that sugar can be called different things too. There's glucose, sucrose. So also paying attention to that in the food labels too, because it may not just be labeled like sugar in the ingredients. It might have another name or substitute for it. So paying attention to that as well.
Totally. Usually that last 3 letters, the OSC, is a pretty good
Mhm.
indicator.
Thank you, ladies.
Well, again, if you're getting ready to sign off, please, if you didn't put your name and the company you work for in the chat box, go ahead and do that now so you can get credit for attending today. And we're really happy that everybody came and joined us today. You can tell your coworkers who couldn't make it that the video will eventually, probably within the next few weeks, be on our YouTube channel. And you can find all of our supporting client health and wellness videos on our YouTube channel for later viewing. We've got a lot of great topics on there, and hope that you guys go check it out.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone.